right, hello. Thank you all for being here. And as always, thanks to Tom and Deborah and David and all the other people that work here for making this place happen. So this is a great resource. This is a rare thing, especially in this area, to have something like this, a museum like this, with all these great instruments, all the great exhibitions that they do, and also what they do for bringing artists here, perform the variety of that they bring to this place. So it's really great. I've played here several times now, and I look forward to playing here many more times. And it's a pleasure to have this place. So thank you to Tom and Deborah and David and all the staff here too. So this is about jazz improvisation. That's what I've been asked to talk about, and that's kind of what I do. I'm a performer, I'm a composer, and I'm also a teacher. So I want to ask a couple questions before we get started. First of all, how many of you are musicians? Anybody musicians? Singers included? You don't have to be a professional, amateur musicians? Okay. And how many of you actually listen to jazz, like jazz and listen to jazz? Good, that's great. Good. How many of you can name like 3 or 4 of your favorite jazz musicians? Okay, good, excellent. So, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to real quickly talk a little bit about the history of jazz, just very short, because I'm sure most of you are familiar with the story. And then I'm going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of just music in general, how music works, but especially as it relates to jazz. So just quickly, I'm sure you're all familiar with the story that this country is a melting pot. You know that. This jazz started in this country, who knows how long ago really, but especially during slavery, right, when slaves started being brought here from Africa. And there began this big cultural exchange began in all the port cities here where slaves were coming in, especially New Orleans, but not just New Orleans. You've got Savannah, Charleston, St. Augustine, all these cities were port cities where slaves were being brought in. And that's where the cultural mix started happening. So particularly in New Orleans, because not only was it a lot of slaves being brought to New Orleans, but just a cultural mix of all people from all over the world. So you have not only the African influence, but the influence of Western classical music, and then you have the folk music from all these different cultures that people were performing on their own. So when you get all this stuff mixing together, it created this amazing music that we call jazz, for lack of a better term. There's a lot of conjecture about what the word jazz means. If you want to get some background, I recommend Ken Burns' first, The Jazz.
Oh, I know what it means.
You know what it means?
Yeah, it means sex.
Okay. Well, I'll let Tom say it. It's his museum, he can say it. So, but anyway, but actually that Ken Burns documentary, it's 10 DVDs, but the first one is really good, just for the background about this music that started in this country. And so, again, I'm not going to get way into it, but it started from mixing the black culture and the Western culture. And, you know, the Africans brought their own rhythm and their own ways of doing music, and it met this Western culture. And then we have like a Black Baptist church, and we have the blues coming out of this. We have all these blacks learning how to use these instruments that they have here, some that they may have been familiar with. I doubt very little of it was brought from Africa, because I don't think they brought very much with them when they came here. And the other thing is there are a lot of, there's a huge variety of cultures in Africa too, so it's not just one influence, it's a huge, you know, continent of different cultures that came here and mixed. So it's a huge thing. So basically, what separates jazz from the other music that was going on? First of all, the feeling of it. And I teach a lot. I teach at Furman some. I teach classical pianists come to me to learn jazz piano. And one of the trickiest things for them to get is the feel of it, because it's different than classical music. It's very different. The syncopation, I mean, classical music uses syncopation too, but the feel of the syncopation in jazz is a tricky thing. So the rhythm, we have 3 elements of music: rhythm, melody, and harmony. This is basically how we think of it, right? So the rhythm is often the trickiest part of it for people that aren't used to it to get a hold of. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about syncopation, how that works. And melody, again, the melody, I think the sound of the blues came from Africa. I really think it came from Africa originally. Now, I have heard Chinese blues, believe it or not. I was watching TV one day, flipping through the channels, I came across this PBS show, And there's this, it's the very end of the show, and there's this Chinese guy sitting on this berm between these rice paddies, wearing some shorts and flip-flops with this little triangular three-stringed instrument, and he's sitting there just, hey, singing away, playing. I looked for a minute, and I thought, man, this guy's playing the blues. It's Chinese. So the thing about it is, I think that form of music is ubiquitous. For one thing, it's very simple, it's very flexible, you can do a lot with it. It doesn't require a lot of knowledge of music, it just requires a basic, being able to get your hands on an instrument or sing and get around some very basic sounds. This is a blues scale, you'll recognize this sound. So basically, it's a pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note scale. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be talking about some things that use a little bit of technical language musically. So if you don't understand something and want me to say something more about it, just raise your hand and ask me questions. I want you to ask me questions, as long as they pertain to what we're talking about. I can go off on tangents all day. I can talk about this all day long. There's so many different directions it can go in. But please feel free to raise your hand and ask me questions, okay? So this blues scale is basically based on a 5-note scale. It's called a pentatonic scale. It sounds like this if you do it in the major key. And if you do it in the relative minor key, it sounds like this. Does anybody understand, who doesn't understand relative major and minor? That's a musical term. Cool, okay, good, all right. So then we can do a lot of stuff with this blues scale. You know, it's very simple, but what we do with the blues scale is we add this chromatic note. And what that is really an approximation. On the piano, we can't bend notes, we can't shape notes like you can on a guitar or with a voice or with a horn or something. So we have this chromatic note that sort of approximates that. But really, it's like singing like you hear in R&B, oh, you know, the voice quavers in the voice and things like that. It's an approximation. I think even the 7th note, and another thing about the blues, so this is a minor sounding. Okay. Have any of you ever been in a real black church? Yes. This is what you'll hear in a real black church. You'll hear the preacher saying, oh, and the people say, oh, amen, whatever. And the people respond, right? It's kind of like call and response in that way, right? And that's what this is, this blues scale. So listen to this now. What does this sound like? Right? It's Asian, sounds Asian music, right? What about this? This is African music, right? It's like a 6/8. It's like an African groove, like Afro pop music. Okay, so in it, what I'm getting at is this basic sound is ubiquitous. You hear this in all kinds of cultures around the world. Right? So, and the tuning might be different because different cultures have slightly different tuning. You might listen to something from, when I first listened to reggae music, I thought, man, it's all out of tune. But you know what? It's consistently out of tune because that's the way they hear it. If you listen to Indian music is another music that's based on improvisation. But they use different scales, they have different ways, they have rules to imply that improvisation. It's an improvisational music. So jazz is not the only improvisational music, but jazz is our improvisational music in this country. And we welcome all these influences from all these different cultures. So we've got Indian music influences besides African. At this point, it comes from all over the world. And rhythm is one of those primary things. One thing that we've gotten from some of the Indian music, Middle Eastern music, is different rhythm feels. Like instead of just 4 beats in a measure or 3 beats in a measure, we've got 5, 7, 9, 11. A lot of jazz musicians are doing these things now. It's not my strong point. I'm working on it. I have a tune I might play for you that I wrote that demonstrates that if we get that far today. But this odd time signature thing is something else that became important in jazz around the 1960s. So, okay, so that's just a little bit of thing about the early influences. The thing about rhythm, that makes jazz so interesting is the syncopation. It makes all music interesting. Actually, syncopation gives music that feeling that it's moving forward. So instead of just up, like this, you know. Like if I play that with a jazz feel, or just some basic syncopation without even a jazz feel. Now I've got some syncopation. I'm accenting the offbeats, right? That's the feeling of syncopation. And that's, jazz takes that to the max. Syncopation is all about syncopation. And it's all about making it interesting and syncopating it effectively. It's all right, come on in, have a seat. So rhythmically, it's all about syncopation, how we syncopate things, how we make it interesting. So for example, I'll play another little sample for you. So there's not really any syncopation there because everything's ba-da-da, everything's on the beat, right? Ba-da-da-da. But to play the same type of thing, I'm not playing anything complicated, but I'm putting a little syncopation in it. It makes it more interesting, right? So this is what we call straight eighth feel. Swing is swing feel, swing eighth. Okay, you recognize that sound? That's swing, okay? It's very basic. What I'm playing, harmonically, what I'm playing is very basic, and melodically, what I'm playing is very simple, but that's the feeling of swing, okay? You hear how it influences the melody, too. Melody is made up of notes moving in rhythm, right? Series of notes in rhythm. So when you have syncopated rhythm, the melody is syncopated as well. Okay? So this progression of jazz, the growth and development of jazz has been the development of these three things: rhythm, melody, and harmony together, all together, and how we make beautiful music out of it. You know? Sometimes not beautiful music, you know. So Tom always likes to say, if you're really doing improvisation, there's always going to be a little blood in the water. So sometimes there's some blood in the water, you know, things get a little ugly, you know, until you figure it out. So, but that's part of the process. That's part of the creative process. Another famous musician who I respect a lot, Paul Bley, made the comment once that it's a lot to ask for an innovator to be a good player as well. Why? This makes sense because if you're trying new stuff all the time, sometimes it's not going to work out, or it's not going to sound good. You know? So I don't consider myself an innovator in the general sense of things, but in my own musical growth, in that way, I'm an innovator because I keep trying new things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know? So, but that's part of the beauty of it. That's how you learn. That's how you develop your own sound, your own voice, and that's the other thing jazz is all about. Jazz is about developing your own sound and your own voice, learning how to take these elements, this common language that we have, and create your own music, your own voice from it, and be able to convey it as clearly as possible. So that brings up another topic, that jazz, in a way, it's folk music. My friend Frank Kimbrough said this to me once. Jazz is folk music, and I keep thinking about that. I think about it a lot. I think the reason is it's a common language. It's a common cultural language that we share as jazz musicians. And actually, as Americans, if we listen to this music and appreciate it and understand it, it's a language that we learn, you know? So, and that's why it's just like any language. The older you are, newer to it you are, the harder it is to learn it. You know, when you've got certain ideas about how you've learned music in the past, but it's a language that we can all learn. At least we can listen to it and appreciate it. So in that sense, I agree with Frank. This is kind of folk music. You learn it by ear to a large degree. You have to learn theory. If you're a jazz musician, you have to know theory and harmony. You have to know all kinds of stuff about music. But you learn the language by sharing it with other people and playing with other people and learning how to interact with other people. that's the thing about jazz too. It's a group art. It's playing music with other people. And it's like living on the edge when you're playing jazz too, because any moment you could fall off the edge. We know about that. It's like right on the edge, right? Any moment it could go wrong, but we help each other. Sometimes when it goes wrong, somebody else in the band goes, "Oh, here, help, here, bang, here you go." Bass player, "Oh, here you go, man." If we're listening to each other and everybody's paying attention. So, okay, so far so good. Any questions?
I have one.
Yeah, please.
Now, are you familiar with Yanni?
Yes, I know about Yanni.
Okay, what would you call his music?
It's Yanni's music. It's
It's
not jazz. I wouldn't say it's jazz. It's like pop, maybe pop music.
but it's really, he's very talented.
Yeah, of course he is. Yeah, yeah, of course he is. Yeah, it's just a different. It's not jazz. It's a different style of music. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's. I don't know how improvisational it is, but it's pop music. I would call it.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, so what I want to do a little bit now is I want to give you kind of a crash course as if you're my students and you come to my studio for the lesson, a couple of lessons. I'm going to give you a little crash course in improvisation, starting with some basic harmony, very basic harmony, and some very basic rhythm. And because of the short time here, I'm just going to go through it kind of quickly and just give you some examples of how harmony develops more complexity and how melodies and rhythm can develop more complexity. And again, ask me questions if you want, okay? I'm going to start off by, everybody knows what a major scale is? Everybody knows what a key center, you know what that means, a key center?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm playing in the key of C major, if I'm using a C major scale, the key center is C major, it just means that. So I'm going to start off with some basic chords in the key of C. Here's a C major scale. So we have primary chords. We call them, in music, we call them 1, 4, and 5 chords. It sounds like this. Here's one. Another way to play it is. So these chords are called triads. They're 3 notes. This is a very basic Western music. Until I get to this 5 chord. When I play this chord, I add another note there and I get what's called a dominant 7 chord. So this is, again, 1, 4, 5, 7. This is the basis of our harmony in Western music, a lot of it, until it gets a little farther along, okay? So I'm going to play something here using this. This is called a cadence. I just put them in this order. So I'm just going to play a little bit. Recognize these sounds, right? This is the blues. If I play it if I put it in a form of blues, I get. Okay, it's real simple blues, triad blues. Okay, so now I'm going to improvise over this a little bit. A couple of ways I could improvise over it. I can just take the chords and I can just use the notes of the chords. So you get something like this. I'm just using the notes of the chords. I'm just playing around with them. Whenever I change the bass note, the chord, I use the notes. Okay. Next thing I can do is I can use the whole scale that goes with it. So I'm playing what's called diatonically. It means in the key. All the notes are in the key of C, but I'm connecting those chords together with the C major scale. Sound familiar at all? A little bit? I call it rock and roll piano. When I teach my kids this, I call it, this is rock and roll piano, okay? This is basic piano that you really need. This is what should be the starting point. I think, don't get me started, but I'm already started. Every kid should be taught this in school when they're 8, 9 years old. Every kid should understand this. They should at least be able to hear it, whether they can do it on an instrument or not. They should be taught this because, for one thing, it helps your brain develop, and for another thing, it helps you understand music. And if kids were taught this earlier, they would begin to appreciate more complex structures musically, and maybe our appreciation of music would go up instead of down.
Preach it, Keith.
What's that?
Preach it, Keith.
Hello. Can I get an amen? Yeah, all right. Right on. Okay, so again, this is pretty diatonic, right? I'm just sticking with the C major scale here. All right. And I'm keeping it pretty simple. If I start to add a little bit more of the stylistic things that you hear in jazz, see what you hear now. So I'm changing the harmony a little bit, but I'm putting in some blues things that you recognize this as blues, right? So this, again, it's part of the language of jazz is to take something like that and put some blues into it, make it sound funky, put some blues sound in it, right? So that's one thing about it. The more complex the harmony gets, though, the more I can do other kind of things too. So I start with these triads, and then what happens is instead of just triads, I get more complex chords called seventh chords, so I add another note. So now diatonically in this key, instead of this with these triads, I get these. I begin to hear these sounds. You recognize these sounds? Okay, here's an example of what starts to happen when I begin to learn this music. Triads and 5/7 chords. Now, I'm going to diatonically start adding some seventh chord harmony to this. Sorry. Okay. So all I'm doing is taking those basic chords and turning them into major seventh chords in the key or diatonic seventh chords. And then I'm adding a little bit of, not to get too, again, I don't want to get too technical, but I'm adding some more elements of our harmony, our modern harmony, to give me more color and more sound, right? So when I begin to improvise over some structure like this, instead of sounding like, if I improvise over it in just a real simple way, this other notes. And even more. So it's taking a simple little song. I can take that song, I could keep going farther and farther and add more and more harmonic complexity to it to where you wouldn't even recognize it unless I play the melody on top of it, right? And that's what another thing that's the other thing that's happening in jazz, or that has happened in jazz. So we start off with this real simple harmony. We start expanding on the harmony, adding complexity, all different kind of colors. And then because of the added harmonic language, now I've got expanded melodic language to draw from as well. So that's what's happened. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about blue notes and which ones are considered blue notes, like even in a C scale, just
Sure,
for a little clarity,
absolutely.
maybe for everyone?
That's a very good question. Okay, so what, Stephanie just asked about blue notes. So the blue notes are what generally that means the notes that they're bent when you're singing or playing an instrument. When you bend that note, you're making it into a blue note. It's in the cracks, you know. It's between the half steps even, you know. It's like it's actually, like I said, you can't approximate it on the piano, although Thelonious Monk claimed he could bend notes. And I believe him. If he's Thelonious Monk, I believe him. But you can bend, you know, you can slide, you know, and that blue note, it's like inside, it's in the cracks. That's what this is, approximation. So this is an approximation of that, right? This could even be that. So that's what it means, really. It's when you have a bent note or in this case, a chromatic note. Okay, and that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Another little detail I wanted to bring up. Another thing about the blues is, it has a lot of tension because it's minor. It has these chromatic notes. It creates a lot of tension. So if I'm playing a C7 chord and I'm playing the blues over that, a lot of times I get this kind of tension over like I get this minor third from that blues scale. So I get this tension. Here's some more tension. All right. So actually, I just reconnected with my first jazz piano teacher, and I interviewed him for my podcast and my Substack. If you want to check it out, it's on my Substack, which is just Keith Davis. Go to Substack, go to Keith Davis or Keith Davis Music. I just put out the first part of this interview. In fact, it should have come out today. And my podcast, it's on my podcast as well. But he calls these things prime dissonances. This is a prime dissonance. This is a major seventh. That could also be a half step if it's inside the chord like this. But if you put it as a major seventh, you get this. And that's how you get, one way that we get a lot of tension, we call them tension. Actually, we call those notes tension notes. So if I play a chord, this is what we call an upper structure note. 1, 3, 5, 7 of the chord, I go up another. So again, another way of adding complexity. That's what I was doing when I was reharmonizing Happy Birthday. I was adding more, not just more notes to the chord, but more tension to the chord by adding more of the upper structure notes. So getting into the weeds a little bit here. So, but that's what's happening. When you hear that tension, that's part of that blue note sound too, is the tension that it creates against the chord tones, right? And the more of those you have, of course, the more tension, the more interest, and the more you create spots that need to resolve. Because this music is about resolution of tension, creation and resolution of tension, right? That's what 5/1 means when I play this. When I play this chord, I get this interval, this interval of the third and seventh of this chord. They're tense. It's called a tritone. It wants to resolve to. If it's here, it wants to go. Right? So that. It wants to resolve. Tension wants to resolve. Dominant resolution. That's from our Western music. That's the thing that wants to happen. It wants to resolve. Even if you have more free forms of music, which I might talk a little bit about if we get that far into even if you have more free forms of music where it's not tonal, but it's just freely improvised, you should still have a feeling of tension and release. There's a feeling of tension and release. It's not only harmonic and melodic, it's also rhythmic. So when you see, like when you have a drummer playing, a jazz drummer, and they're playing all the stuff they're playing, playing, maybe I'm playing something like, bang, there it is. Everybody, if you feel it coming, he sets it up. If he's good, he's building all this tension. You've seen jazz drummers before. They're doing all this, really good ones. They're all over. It can be all building up tension or adding tension. The whole band, you feel it building. Bang. Then the whole band goes bang. You feel it. That's the release of the tension. That's what it's about, building the tension and releasing the tension. That's harmonic, it's rhythmic, it's melodic, it's all those things together. So all these things I'm talking about are different parts of that, but they all work together. If any one of them's missing, then it's not going to be the whole thing, the whole package, so to speak. Okay, everybody with me so far? Any questions? No?
You talked earlier about each musician needs to make it their own. Where's style? Is that style?
Yeah.
Style coming?
Yes, I think I understand your question. So another thing about jazz, this is a little bit different topic, but another thing about jazz is jazz has been through a lot of development of different, you can call it different styles. It's kind of, I think what happens is actually an individual comes out and goes, like, here's a new innovation. An individual or a small group of people within a certain group of musicians sort of comes out and goes, hey, here's a new thing. And then other people start to go, oh, that's it right there. Let's all do that, or let's copy that. So I think that what happens with the changes of styles is there are a few people that hear something different. Like the prime example I think of is Charlie Parker. When Charlie Parker discovered and began to create bebop, he wasn't the only one, but because Dizzy was there, Monk was there, Bud Powell, these other people were involved in it too. And there were other people too that just weren't necessarily as well known, but they were the ones that were out there creating this music. So when someone makes an innovation like that, then it influences the language of the music. And everybody else either, keeps up, learns it and keeps up and goes forward, or they just keep doing what they're doing and they then have a style that stays that way. Like, for example, there's New Orleans music still to this day, right? It still sounds like New Orleans music. There's some development. You can't say there's no development, but there's development because individual people are playing it. And even if they're playing in that style, individual people are going to do something that's individual in their own music, and it's going to do something to move the style along, hopefully, But yes.
What's the difference or the correlation between Dixieland and jazz?
Dixieland, you can say it's just early jazz. The better term would be to call it New Orleans jazz, I think. It's like New Orleans jazz, but it's just an early style of jazz. It's still jazz, it can be, or sometimes maybe not, but it's an early form of jazz. It's still played all over the world.
Can you play Dixieland?
I can if I have to. A little bit. But that's it's not the style that I play. For me I couldn't authentically play it. Put it like that.
To me, it sounds like Dixieland sounds like jazz piano.
Well,
to
it
me.
is. There's Dixieland style jazz piano, so that's not wrong. It's just another style. So once again, I could play with a band like that, and I have. It's not. I can't play it authentically because that's not the style that I'm working on. I'm working on my own style, But and it's never going to end. Hopefully it keeps developing and growing, But it's just and those labels are just convenient labels, You'll hear 10 different Dixieland bands, and you're going to hear 10 different guys playing Dixieland a different way, So it's kind of limiting to call something a style and put it but it's convenient historically to go, okay, in the 20s we had this style and this style, and then it developed into this style and this style. It's like a convenient box to put things in so that we can have a general understanding of it. Does that make sense? So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, jazz. So I was talking about, I think, the development of the complexity. And so I think this would be a good place to, I'm going to play a little bit of blues for you, and a couple of different, a little bit different styles maybe of blues, just show you a little bit different things about the blues, because it's like I said, it's a convenient form. It can be very simple, or it can get as complex as anything else, because again, we've got all this harmonic development that's happening. So you can take the blues and make it completely unrecognizable. You could do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to play a little bit of some, just a couple of different things. You'll see what I mean. But another point I will make about jazz improvisation and the growth of it is, it's when it started out, again, it was simple. There wasn't all this harmonic complexity yet, or melodic complexity. So basically, the improvisation, early improvisation, was more like embellishment of melodies. Okay, it's more like you play, like if I play a tune like I'm just embellishing the melody. If you listen to Louis Armstrong, you're going to hear a lot of embellishing the melody. You're not going to hear bebop necessarily, right? That started with Charlie Parker, and the language changed when you start playing a little bit more complex harmonies. Instead of improvising over a tune like that with the embellishment, I'm going to start playing more linearly, and I'm going to be relying more on the harmonic structure for my improvisational ideas, for my melodic improvisational ideas, okay? So that's what I'm going to show a little bit with the blues here. So I'm just going to play, let me pull this up. I'm just going to play a 12-bar blues. I'll show it to you. Conveniently uploaded on the computer here. Hopefully. Hey, look at that. Okay. This is just it's a standard form of blues. It's 12 bars. This is the normal thing that Oh, buy it now. Wait, let me put my email address in there if you want to buy it now.
Good times.
Exit out, man.
I'm Xing it out, man. Goodbye. Okay. All right, so the most standard form of blues is 12-bar blues. You've heard it a million times. This is rock and roll. Blues is related to hymns, same kind of harmony. It's hymns, rock and roll. What else was I going to say? Another type of music. But you've heard this music plenty of times. So, and I just played a little bit of this, but I'm just going to play this form and see if you can follow along. So, not the bottom one. This is two different forms. This bottom one is already a little bit more complex than this. I'll play this in a minute too, but this is when jazz musicians play the blues. We usually start with this kind of form, right? It's a little bit, just has a little bit of added harmony to it. But I'm going to play this one, which is just 12-bar, 3-chord blues, okay? So you'll hear this. This before, right? So now I'm going to improvise a little bit. I doing?
You're playing you're playing the melody through the harmonic.
Right.
You're playing it through the harmonic change.
I am.
Through the harmonic
Right.
changes,
And exactly what material am I using to do that? It's my student, Kurt.
Oh, yeah.
Put him on the spot. Exactly what material. What am I using? What material am I using? You know what I mean?
You're using the chord tone.
I'm using the chord tones, only the chord tones, okay? I didn't play any blues notes. I didn't add any scale notes in between. All I did was outline the chords, just the chord tones of the chords. I'll do it again. You see, I'll do it a little more clearly. Now I'm just playing the notes of the chords. Now, because they're seventh chords and because they're dominant seventh chords, it sounds interesting, and it sort of hides the fact that I'm doing that. If you weren't aware of it, you wouldn't probably notice it, right? But Kurt's aware of it because we've been talked about this before. So, and a couple of other people here that are my students. Who shall remain nameless until I need to embarrass them. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to play over the same chord changes, but I'm going to use the scales. I'm not going to use the blues scale yet. I'm just going to use the scales that go with the chords, okay? So, and I'll try to make it clear, at least at the beginning. So now I'm using the scales. Now each one of these chords in this case has its own scale. They're not all in the same key, so there's a little difference. There's one note different there from the C, and then, so there's a little bit of difference. A couple of notes that are different. One note unique to each scale, one or two notes that are just unique to that scale in this case. So when I play that, I mean, any musician that hears that's going to go, oh, he's playing the blues and he's playing the scales that go with the chords, all right? So now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to add some blues things in it. So see, you'll hear the difference here too, I think. So now I'm using a combination of all those things now. I'm using the chord tones, I'm using the scales, chord scales, we call them. The scales that go with the chords, we call them chord scales. We can also call them modes. I'll talk about that in a minute. Or we can use the blues scale or blues, stylistic blues things like this. Like you hear this it's not necessarily the blues scale, but I'm using stylistic things that approximate that, bending those notes. Okay, see what I mean? So that's what you hear. Rock and roll guitar players have made $1 billion doing this, you know, right? And I want some of it. I want some of their money. I don't think they're going to give it to me, though. What do you think?
We give $5.
Do I hear $1.380? All right. Okay. So that's blues. Now I'm going to play something a little different. I'm going to use this form at the bottom, and I'm going to just play through it and show you what that sounds like. See if you hear the difference between that, what I just played, and this. And I'm going to change the way I'm playing the chords a little bit stylistically too, to fit more. So what I'm doing now, when I play these chords, like I'm going to add more what I call the tensions to the chords. All right, I'm going to add more color to the chords instead of just playing chord tones. I'm going to add more color. So here I'm going to play a C7. It might sound like this. Here's the chord. Here are the tensions that I can use. Okay, so now I'm going to play through the bottom one here. C. Add the chords from this. So you hear some different colors in there now, a little bit, just a little bit. And it can add more tension, but in a way, some of it sounded less blues-like, right? Some of it sounded like when I get to some of these chords, that sounds more like major chordish, major sounding. It doesn't sound so tense as some of the other, but I could do something with that too. I could, you know. So what I'm doing now is I'm altering the chords to give more attention to the chords. So I'm changing the qualities of the chords. So I'm taking a basic, maybe I'm taking a basic D minor 7 chord. It sounds like this in that context. And I'm reharmonizing it to play something like this. From this to this. Or this. So, see what I mean? I can change the tension depending on how I feel like expressing it at the moment. Or if maybe I write the tune in a certain way I want to include those tensions. I want to include that variety of sound. So again, it's increasing levels of complexity and more choices, more colors, more choices of colors that you can use to get more expression. So, does that sound right, Kurt?
Absolutely, yeah. You're above my pay grade, but I like
What's
it.
that?
You're going above my pay grade, but I
No,
like
no,
it.
no, that's great. Yes, sir.
Would you end a blues on a dominant 7th chord?
Good question. Okay, so did everybody hear that? Can you end a blues on a dominant 7th chord? Yes, because the blues is kind of a special case thing. It's all dominant 7th chords, really. I mean, until I get here, I had some different harmonies. We don't want to, here, this is not dominant 7, and I could add more of this kind of 2-5, we call it 2-5. I could add more minor chords into it, but yes, it's dominant 7s. It's just a sort of special case thing. This has been one of my questions for years. Why? How does that work? You know, I want somebody to tell me who decided on this. But you know, I think it's folk music. I think it's because it's folk music and it's the sound. It's a particular sound that it gives. You know, and I think that's the reason. So yes, we ended on a dominant 7 chord, but it could be major 7. I could play major 7 blues like this. In fact, this was one of Charlie Parker's innovations. You could play blues that did something like this. But so that's another possible variation. It could be more major sounding, even more major 7th sounding, or more major 6 sounding, less strident sounding. The dominant 7 sound, it does sound unresolved, right? Because I get this chord, this tritone. So when I end on that, but I think it's just part of the language. We just gotten used to hearing it. You know, does that make sense? Yeah. It's part of the folk music tradition of jazz, I think, you know, personally. And again, my friend Frank told me that. Frank Kimbrough told me that, and Frank should know. So, 'cause he was an expert. Okay, any questions about this so far?
I have a question.
Yes. Absolutely.
Could you explain the pentatonic scale again and
Sure.
how that fits in? And what,
Sure.
I know you said it was 5 notes.
Yeah, 5 notes, and they're actually all it means is 5 tone, penta, 5 tones, 5 tone, pentatonic, 5 tones. So there are more than one pentatonic. There's like, if you go in, there's a book called Slonimsky's Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns. There's like 59 different types of pentatonic scales. So
Okay.
it's any
Can you
combination
use,
of 5 notes.
Like the key
I'm
of
gonna show what you.
C as an
I'm
example.
going to show you an example, but I wanted to say a little bit about that thing because the few pentatonic scales that we generally use, it's just a few that we choose because they work well over certain chords, right? They match certain chords or they work well over those chords, and it's convenient. But one of the things about the increasing complexity of jazz is that what we're doing is we're adding more chromaticism to the music. We're adding more harmonic chromaticism, right? So, and that's what I'm personally working on with my own music. I'm trying to figure out ways to add more chromaticism, but not sound like everybody else that does it. So, you know, I might never get there, but I just go for it and hope for the best a lot of times. But there are methodical ways of going about it, and pentatonic scales are one of those things. So I'm gonna come back to your question.
Okay.
But the increasing chromaticism is kind of what nowadays is what you hear the great players doing. They're adding chromaticism to their playing. I'll explain a little more about it. That's part of what I want to talk about. So, but okay, so the pentatonic thing, if the most simple one is just this. So if I play a major scale, if I start on C, I'm just playing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? Right? If I take out the 4th and the 7th degrees of that scale and I just play 1, 2, 3, that's the basic pentatonic scale. We call it major pentatonic, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. I've taken out the notes that add more tension, or like, for example, if I play this 4th note of that scale, if I play the chord in this hand, let's play here, and I play that 4th note an octave above it, hear that? I get what's called a flat 9 interval, or we call it it's a minor ninth, we call it a flat 9. That's a bad rub, bad tension, we call it a bad rub. That's a bad rub. I don't want that in my chord. I don't want to end the song and go, I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. Right, okay, I put that major 7 in there under that melody note. So I don't want to do that. I could do this. I could go. I could change that major 7 to a 6, and that's a more pleasant sound. Although to me it wants to go. I hear it wanting to be resolved like that. But I don't want to go, right? So I've taken that note out. I'm not even using that note in the scale. I'm just using these notes that they don't create any tension. That major 7th, again, the major 7th above the root gives that tension, which we like. We call that, my teacher calls that prime dissonance. And we like that major 7. That's what gives us a lot of color in a lot of the chords. In fact, I'll show you more about that in just a minute too. The major 7 interval, but in this case, it's more tense than we even want in that pentatonic scale. Right? You can't go wrong with any of those notes. I saw a thing, Bobby McFerrin does a thing where he has them put out on the floor and he jumps from one note to the other and he has the crowd sing. You've probably seen, some of you have seen this video. He jumps from one to the other and he has the crowd sing along, you know. And then he does 3 or 4, he does a little melody and then he gets ready to jump and the whole crowd sings the next note, but he doesn't jump there. You sing it because you hear it. It's so predominant. It's so predominant in our musical culture that you're programmed to hear it, and you hear it, and they all sing. And it's really funny, actually. But he's making a point. This is something that's common. It's common language. Right? So this pentatonic scale, the way it works is I can play it over C chord. I can play it over in this key. I can play it over D minor. Listen to how this works over these chords. I play a D minor chord. Hear that? Sounds nice, right? Here's the E minor chord in the key, E minor 7. I get a little bit of tension here against this. If I play E minor 7, I get that tension, so that's a little tense, but if I play C over E, if I play F major 7, let's see what happens. Beautiful, sounds great. G, now here I'm going to get some tension, because I'm going to have this tension, right? So that's a little iffy there. When I go to A minor is the relative minor. It uses the same exact scale. If I play those 5 notes and start on A instead of C, that's A minor. So that's exactly the same. That's relative minor. That pentatonic fits perfectly with either one of those chords. And then if I play the B, I'm going to get some tension also. Already I've got some tension there. But over 5 of those chords in that key, that pentatonic works perfectly fine. And so in every major key, there are 4 of those major pentatonics, each built on one of the primary chords. Right? So sometimes those pentatonics you can play one of those pentatonics over one of the other chords. You can figure out which one works over what, in other words. And this is a way that people use to get more chromaticism in their playing, because these scales are relatively simple. Like if I'm playing over D minor, I I could be playing this C pentatonic, and I could play another pentatonic that's outside of the key that's a little dissonant. Right? So I'm just combining some of those pentatonics, going back and forth. That's one way to get a little more chromaticism. We call it sidestepping in jazz lingo, you know. It just means trying to add more chromaticism to your melodic lines or to your harmonies. I could superimpose some of those harmonies as well and get more tension. So there are a lot of ways, there are multiple ways sometimes of describing one thing that you're doing. So I could be superimposing these things harmonically, like, you know, I could be playing this pentatonic bass thing with this on top of it. I get some real tension in the chords.
Stick a damper hanging up, that's okay.
Damn, damn.
Yeah.
That's all right. We'll let it go for now. But anyways, that makes sense? Does that sort of answer your question?
It helps.
Pentatonics are very helpful because they're simple little pieces of scales that don't have any tension, inherent tension of their own. But they can create tension depending on what chords you use them over, and then you can use them chromatically to generate tension. One way to think about the chromaticism, let me see if I can find this other thing here. Close this. Okay, I didn't put the circle of fourths in here, but if you know what the circle of fourths is? Circle of fifths, you've heard of circle of fifths? If you heard circle of fifths, you're wrong. In jazz, we call it circle of fourths, but it's the same thing. You go around the key centers, you go like this. Right? So if I play C pentatonic, let's say I'm playing a C chord and I play that pentatonic. Okay, if I go around the circle of fourths, I keep the C scale, but I go to the next pentatonic around the circle, I get this pentatonic. So already I'm getting some more tension, right? Then I go to the next one, B flat. I'm getting even more tension. The farther I go around the circle away from that home key that I'm in, the more notes I get that are out of the key that sound tense. So by the time I get around all the way from C to the opposite, which is G flat, then all the notes are out of the key. So here's a C chord with a G flat pentatonic on top. Right? So it's going to sound really tense. And we do that all the time in jazz. If I'm playing a C7 chord, maybe I'm playing a C7 chord, you know, and I want to make it more tense. So instead of playing, I might play. So if I play this, I'll play in this key. Right? But when I get to that C chord, if I want to create some tension, I could think of. Add more tension. So what I'm doing is I'm thinking about that. Going G. Does that make sense? So I'm going from something that sounds diatonic within the key. I'm creating more tension by either substituting another pentatonic, or I could just think of it as changing the quality of the chord. I've changed that chord from C7 to C7 with lots of tension on it, right? Instead of, I just added more tension to it. And that's another way to add more color to the harmony, and to the melody, and to the rhythm, because it helps you think more rhythmically in a way too. Think about how do I make that work? How do I get back to the key that I'm going for if I'm playing all these altered notes that are not in that diatonic, in that harmony? Does that make sense too? Okay. Questions? Yes.
So when you're improvising, when do you choose to do that?
Right now.
I mean, because you don't want to, to your point, you want to create that tension
Yeah.
and release. Like,
You can, okay, that's a good question. You can create that harmonic structure ahead of time. You can reharmonize something, we call it reharmonization. I could add those reharmonizations into the harmony and plan to do that. Or, I could just be improvising, especially if I'm playing with people that are, that are good players, that are listening, and, everybody's listening to each other, and we're all trying to help each other out and make some good music, then I can just spontaneously do something like that. We do it all the time, I was doing it last night a little bit, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, But again, you got to try it. If you want to try it, you got to try it. If you work it all out, to me, if you work it all out ahead of time, it's going to sound like you worked it all out ahead of time. Right. But jazz is in the moment, like life is in the moment. We're right here, right now. There's no past and there's no future. The past is all in your memory, and the future is all in your imagination. All we have, that we're present right now in this moment. And that's where we're at, and that's what jazz is about too. I'm right here in this moment, and it's spontaneous. I don't know exactly what might happen next. Something might happen next. You don't know what your next thought's going to be, right? How can you know what your next thought's going to be? When you're improvising, you don't know what the next guy's going to do next to you, or what you might think. You might hear something and go, oh yeah, I'll go there. Or you decide, you just might go, let me just try something different here. Instead of doing the same thing, instead of doing something that I'm already pre-programmed to do that I've done before, let me just take a millionth of a second and change my mind and go to this note instead of that note. You know what I mean? That's what makes it exciting and opens up this world of possibilities. Improvisation means creating it in the moment. To me, it means just being in the moment and responding to the possibilities that moment presents to you. Because it's all right now. Yes.
So do you find that if you're getting a different feel from a different audience, that it influences how you do your improvisation?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. One of my teachers always says to me, it's a two-way street. I talk to him, and I say something like, I appreciate this talk. It really helped me. I really got something back. He always says it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. If you're playing for an audience and somebody's listening, then you get energy from that. It inspires you to want to do something, dig deeper, do something. It happens all the time. Some of that last night. We had some people listening. Last weekend, I played in the same club, and Kristen came and sang with us, and it was just a small crowd. Stephanie was there. We had just a small crowd of people, but everybody was listening to us, because most of the people that were there actually came to hear us, So that's where you get energy. When that happens, you get energy from that. Just like this, you people came to hear me talk about this stuff. I'm just jacked up with energy to talk about all this stuff. Because I love talking. I can talk about this stuff all day. It's what I do. Besides playing and writing my own music, I teach. I teach a lot of kids that go to the Fine Arts Center. I teach kids at Furman. I teach some adults, and I love talking about this stuff. Ask my students. I think they'll tell you that. I love working with this stuff, and it gives me ideas too. So it's definitely an energy exchange. When you have people listening to you, I play at the Weston Poinsett Hotel 3 nights a week, and a lot of times I'm just looking around. I'll be playing. I'll look around, see if anybody listening. And a lot of times nobody. Or sometimes somebody is, but I don't know it until they come up and say something later. Say, I really like what you were doing. They might not have shown it, But if I see somebody watching, if I see somebody, I notice that their attention is on the music, it just makes my energy pick up like that. So it's definitely about energy. When you get more energy, it makes you want to perform better, and it makes me feel like I want to, give something extra to those people that are listening. So that's a great question. What was the other question?
Diane Krall, she's a jazz pianist,
She
okay?
is. She's very good. She actually studied with one of my heroes, Jimmy Rolls.
Okay,
Yeah.
and would you say that most of the music that she plays, of course, she gets a lot of people requesting songs,
Uh-huh.
songs that we all know,
Uh-huh.
the familiar ones, but would you say that a lot of her piano playing is improvisation?
Yes.
She's got a certain style.
She does have a certain style, and she's accompanying herself at the piano. So it's improvisation. She improvises too, but she also accompanies herself, which means a lot of that what she's playing is probably worked out to some degree, because she knows what she's going to sing, and and she knows, she's worked out what kind of accompaniment she's gonna play to make it to support her singing, support what she's singing, you know? And that's what harmony is. Harmony is supporting the melody. That's what harmony is all about. Harmony is supporting the melody, right? We call it harmonizing melodies. That's what harmony really is. So, but she does improvise, and she's a good piano player. To be honest, I like her piano playing better than her singing.
I do too. And
Yeah.
her style is,
Yeah.
you know, she just has a certain
Yeah,
style.
she's good. She's good, and she's a great piano player, actually. And she studied with Jimmy Rose, like I said, one of my heroes. And the music that she does generally is what we call from the Great American Songbook, which is Gershwin, Cole Porter, all those great songs. You know? So, yes.
So that
Yes.
style would be more like embellishing the melody, right?
Well, I
Than just
mean-
free improvisation.
Well, I mean, honestly, I haven't listened to her enough to, I mean, she's doing more than embellishing the melody. I mean, you know, she has a great band behind her too. I mean, she can improvise at the piano. She's not just embellishing. She understands, you can tell she understands what she's doing. And so she can improvise, you know, she's not just embellishing. She's using the harmonic structures. She's playing modern jazz piano, basically, you know. It's her own style, and it's, you know, it's not, maybe not the most adventurous in some ways, you know, because it's not what she's doing. What she's doing is giving a certain interpretation of that music, you know, and making her music, her piano playing, conform to that style, you know. So, but she's great. I mean, especially, like I said, her playing is really good. She's a great piano player.
It seems like her improvisation, though, it just seems like, you know, she'll be playing and all of a sudden in a split second, she'll just, something will come up here and
Yeah.
she'll go right into it.
Yeah, she's improvising with her voice too as well. And in that sense, maybe it's more, you could think of it more as embellishing. You know, she's not, I've never heard her scat singing. I don't know that she scat sings, but maybe she does. If you're scat singing, then that can be more like a melodic improvisation, you know. Whereas if you're just going like, just change a note here and there, add some inflections or something, that's more like embellishment. I think of that more as embellishment. But if you're actually doing something like scat singing, where you're actually making a solo over the chord changes, a harmonically based solo, then that's different. That's linear melodic improvisation based on the harmony. That's a little different. Not little different, it's radically different, actually. But, okay. Yeah, there was another question from, so yes.
As a non-musician,
Uh-huh.
one of the things that I love about improvisational jazz is the unpredictability of it.
There you go.
I can listen to jazz in the background and not be distracted by the normal things that you know are going to come out, you know, stepping on the next chord thing. And that's what I love when you get a group, you know, a trio or something, and they start taking off and they play against each other.
Right.
The bass player plays against the guitarist or the pianist in that. So I like that unpredictability, because so much is like in music these days.
Right, sure.
And jazz will probably always remain my favorite because of that.
Great.
So I appreciate, you know, not being able to understand chords or anything like that. I appreciate the unpredictable sounds that come out when we're improvising.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to say it and a beautiful thing to say about it. I appreciate that, especially as non. Yes, sir.
So we're coming up to the bottom of the hour. Why don't you take a moment and go through one of your pieces?
Okay, yeah, so I brought some of my own music to share with you and just to talk about, because I'm a composer as well. And as a composer of jazz, I write tunes that are vehicles for improvisation. You know, that's why, that's what I do, is I write tunes that I can improvise on. Not just me, I want them to be interesting for the other musicians as well, you know? So, and I've tried to, when I was trying to choose tunes to present here, which I'm not going to get to more than one, maybe two, actually, maybe two. You know? So I was looking through my tunes last night, and I was going, okay, which ones am I going to talk about? And I was going like, man, I got like, I just didn't realize how many, what a variety of stuff that I have, you know, that I've written. So it really had to narrow it down, and now I'm really going to have to narrow it down. But it sort of surprised me. I was like, okay, I hope I play effectively over all this stuff, you know, because some of them are really tricky, actually. You know. But let's pick one. Do you have a request, Tom, for something? No?
Artist choice.
Artist choice. Okay. Let's see. I chose a few here. Let's see what I chose here. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay, I'm gonna pick. This is a tune. Probably some of you have heard me play it. It's called Field Theory. Let's see if it will pull up here. Okay, there it is. My chicken scratch. I thought I had the other version. I've learned how to use MuseScore and write out these tunes so they look like real music, but I haven't gotten to all of them yet. So this is a tune of mine. It's in a minor key. It's in the key of B minor, but so you'll hear these are all standard progressions, and everything here is just basically diatonic to the key of B minor until it gets to here. And then I get the 7 chord, and it goes to this chord, and then it goes here. What eventually happens is, well, it goes to this. This is just the 4 chord in B minor. So it's still, this chord becomes the dominant 7 of this chord. We call this a secondary dominant. This B minor 7 becomes a B dominant 7, and now it resolves to E minor. But that E minor is 4 in the key of B flat, so it's still in the key of B flat minor. This key is just relative to that. Then it goes back to this, resolves back to the 5 chord of B minor, back to B minor. And then it goes here. Now it goes to, I should have sort of written F sharp minor, but I was lazy and I wrote G flat minor because sharps are hard. So but this goes to the F minor, F sharp minor. Now it's not that far away from B minor. It's kind of a relative of, because if you're within a certain distance, if you're a 4th or a 5th away, those keys can be relative. That's another harmonic thing to get into. But anyway, it goes to the key of F sharp just briefly, and then it comes back to end in B minor. So it's not really that complex harmonically, but just listen and see what you think. So this is what's called straight eighths. I wrote bossa here. It's not really a bossa nova, but it's a straight eighths feel. That means even eighths and not swing eighths. So if you'll, I'm going to play it about this tempo. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. So it's 4 bars to a line, so it's convenient to read. Down here, it's an extra 2 bars of this chord, and then just back. So what we do when we improvise over a tune, generally speaking, we play the tune all the way down, then we go back to the top, and we use the harmonic and use the form, which is the form is how it's laid out, the form and the harmonic structure to improvise over the tune. That's generally what we do in jazz. So I'll start by just playing a few bars of B minor as an introduction. Change. Back to the top. I'm going to improvise a little. Thank you very much. So, and you might have heard on the way out, I was embellishing the melody. Well, I played it pretty straight ahead when I played it the first time through. When I came back at the end, generally it's what you play the melody, then improvise, play the melody. And that's generally how we organize the performance. So I embellished the melody a little more on the way out, just to do it.
Where are you playing next?
I'm going to play one more. I think I have time for one more, Tom.
I mean, in public.
Oh, when in public?
Like, where will you be?
I will be at the Weston this week, Wednesday through Friday, 5:30 to 8:30 in the lobby bar. And if you come see me, I'll be very happy.
Okay. That's why I asked.
Okay. So I mentioned something about modes. I didn't get into it because just lack of time, but modes are just scales, all kind of different scales. We call them modes. They can be called modes or chord scale, different names for it. But modes are just different ways of naming scales. Like for example, real quickly, if I'm in the key of C, if I play a C scale, that's called Ionian mode. If I start on D and play the same notes but start on D, that's called Dorian mode. If I start on E and play the same notes, it's called Phrygian mode, right? So, okay. So stop that. So I like to write tunes that are modally based as well. So I've got this tune. I'm just going to show it to you. I'm still working on this tune. I've been performing it, but I've made it a project because this is a good vehicle for adding chromaticism. Because, and you can't see the whole tune here, but I'm just to show you part of it. So you see this first 4 bars, it just says G minor. It doesn't even say 7. I haven't even defined it as a 7 chord. Although it can be 7. Minor 7th chords are interesting because I can have this. Here's the minor part of it, 1, 2, 5. Then when I get to the upper notes, the 6 and 7, I've got several choices. I can play this. That's the natural minor. That's the same as the relative major. Okay, but I could change that note, or I could play. So one way you can introduce chromaticism here is just by varying how you play the 2 top notes of that scale. Is it 6 or is it flat 6? Is it 7 or is it flat 7? And any combination of those things. That's one way. What I've done here is I've created some of my own scales to improvise over this tune, but I can't do it yet because it's new and I have to make a living teaching people and playing in public, so I don't get to practice enough. But I have created some of my own scales, like instead of playing this, I play this. So you hear all the chromaticism there. Got all this. So that's one way of doing it, is to create different scales or use different scales that you just superimpose over that harmony. The other way is what I was talking about with the pentatonics, is where I basically play the scale and then I weave in and out of that scale and try to come back to it. So that's another way of approaching things chromatically. So eventually, as I get better at playing this tune, I'll be doing some of all of that stuff. I have to look at this one because it's still relatively new. And I'll just play a real quick version of it. And the whole tune's not up there. This is just the first page. It's not even the whole first page, but since we're where we are, I'm just going to play it for you. right? So again, what I'm doing is I'm starting with one basic scale choice over each chord. It's called modal because it doesn't change chords like a functional harmony, like normal tunes do. Like if I play this tune, for example. Right, you hear the progression of the harmony. It's normal. It's called functional harmony. The chords move in certain ways. In modal music, they don't move like that. This chord just stays static for 4 bars. I could have a modal tune that just has one scale the whole time. If you ever listen to James Brown, you've heard some modal music. Or Sly Stone, I was thinking of a Sly Stone tune. A lot of that music is just modal. It's just one scale and one chord, right? But here, it's different chords, but they change. They're not related to each other, really. It just goes from this chord to this chord and scale. This chord, this chord, this chord. They're not necessarily related to each other functionally. So that's what that is. It's non-functional harmony. It's modal music. And there are other ways of non-functional harmony as well, but that's a big topic too. So anyway, any last questions before we wrap it up? Yes.
If you're playing with a combo and it's your turn to improvise, does everybody know how long you're going to improvise?
If it's me and my band, they don't know, and I mean, they don't, and they probably go, God, when's it gonna be over? No, I'm joking. No, generally, no, not necessarily. It depends on the circumstances, you know? Like, it depends on the circumstances, honestly. Sometimes if we can stretch out and play, we might play longer solos, take a long time to play. We might play a tune like this for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you know? Or it might be 5 minutes. It depends on the circumstance. We played this tune I was in Savannah with my quartet back in January, and we played this tune and we really stretched out on it. We stretched it out for a long time. It's fun when you can do that. When you have guys that can do that and keep the interest going the whole time, you know, not just guys, I just say that relative, but you know, people in the band that can play. If you can keep that interest going, you know, then it can just go on and on as long as everybody feels like it. You know, and everybody can take a turn, drum solo maybe, or trade with the drums, or with the sax player. We had a sax player. I mean, it can get long, you know. But the thing is, does it maintain interest? You got to maintain the interest, you know. So if you get good players, you can maintain interest in something like that for a longer period of time, and everybody supports it, and it can just build and build and build, and they can do this, you know, it goes up and down, and you know, and it could be really, beautiful thing. So,
When you stretch it out, though, do you go all the way through the form?
yes.
And then just keep going?
Yes.
Until
Good question. Yes, just keep playing the form over and over. Unless it's free, and we play some free music too, where I just have a melody. I didn't, you know, plan to do any of that. So if I just have some things that are written for free improvisation, that means no rules, you know. Just here's the melody, play the melody, and everybody play. Everybody just improvise and listen to each other. In some ways, my buddy Ron says he thinks that's the purest form of jazz improvisation because there's no rules, and you really have to listen to each other. You have to have good players that can listen to each other and react and support each other, because otherwise it can just fall completely flat, you know. But if you have good players, then yeah, I'm going to have to wrap it up.
You gotta wrap it up, guys.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, dear.